It is important to demonstrate to the Nigerian market that in the formation space and the challenges we face tomorrow, you will need collaborations a lot. So I stand here to represent my firm and the industry to support what is going on, but most importantly, to deliver what I thought was a goodwill message, but may turn out to be a keynote speech, as it were. So, given that the distinguished members here represent what I call those who serve the consumers, the FMCG groups, the telcos, the fintechs, and the bank, but mostly the FMCG groups, it is important that I let you understand two things. One, you have the responsibility of predicting and shaping consumer behaviors, yet you have the burden of bearing the shifts in consumer behavior and trends that occur, especially in a big squeeze. I'm sure you all understand what a big squeeze is. But what we have in Nigeria today is a very difficult economic time, especially for just one major reason. The rate of decline in consumer income is moving at a faster rate, far higher than the rate of increase in prices and opportunities, including stagnated income flow. So families have what you call a real situation. But let nobody scare you. It is unlike any other thing before. It is something similar to other things. The only difference is that the ability and the capacity for government to respond is far diminished right now than before. The challenge we face is the need to understand that the problem we face is the necessary catalyst to reestablish a new order. And the nature, interaction, or better use of what you call data or research data. Your understanding of the consumer has changed. The categorizations you put consumers has no bearing when it comes to what you call debilitating economic crisis. If you call me a middle-income person, I can tell you that the electricity tariff bill has affected me significantly. Now I understand the value of putting off light. Now my decision-making becomes a lot more different, therefore. I then have to do cost-benefit analysis. Your branding has nothing to do at that moment for me. And it is important that we understand that at different levels. So if you take a look at the strata of human beings, you begin to understand what is going on. You see, the macroeconomy of nations is either consciously designed as castles, or it exists by default, taking on the characteristics of a sand castle. Both look like a castle. So when cracks and shocks occur, it is only those who have the fundamentals in place that are able to survive it. In fact, since the global financial crisis, and if you study what goes on around you, most people do not look around the economies. You look at the component parts of the economy that is functioning, despite and in spite of the governments that you have. If you take a look at your financial markets and you look at your manufacturers, you will see. In Nigeria, let's take a look at some economic dashboard. Every one of you like to hear sad stories, to say Nigeria is bad, Nigeria is terrible, Nigeria is not doing so well. In actual fact, I've often asked you, it depends on the neighborhood you live in. So if you live in a particular neighborhood that there's no development there, that tells your story. But if you go and live in a particular neighborhood, you notice that some people are even painting the outside of their fence. Some people are changing cars. Some people are making new decisions. But pay attention. Have you ever noticed that there are some 3 or 2 metrics you can watch that without you getting data that you can tell whether a country is doing well? Hotel occupancy. Number of people who fly in and out of your country. If any of those metrics are not going entirely southwards, in spite of the increased prices, you are missing something about that economy, because you are looking at it from the old model. And so some of the decisions you therefore take will be limited because of that old model. But having said that, it is important to look at 7 critical components of the macroeconomy. Overall productivity, it has declined 16.11%. Significantly higher because we're just looking at quarter and quarter. The purchasing power index has dropped below the 50% median. It's at 49.2 right now. That tells you the capacity of companies to produce, but it's still not so dire. The misery index, however, has worsened. It has increased to 39.19%. That is approximately 40% of your population are exactly in the misery. I'm not talking about poverty, right? I'm talking about actual misery The disposable income change. Now, this is important to explain to you. There are two sides to this. I think people focus too much on minimum wage. Leave minimum wage. There's what you call average wage. But there's a problem with the average wage because the total number of employees in the formal sector is less than 10 million of a population of 200 million. Ceteris paribus. But then the wage issue is so critical because it then reflects in the computations of how we calculate disposable income. The second part is that everybody tells you that you have 100 million consumers in Nigeria. I'm sure all of you are businessmen. I'm sure you know that that figure is something of a myth. Because what you really should track is how many of the population has disposable income. It is not the number, it is the number with disposable income. And that is what you would use. For those, I think Nielsen as well and PwC, they've done some ratings on the retail industry, and the numbers are not the same. The other ones, which you talk about mostly, is core inflation and food inflation. But the less talked about is the cost of credit in the society. So let me explain something to you. What is going on right now is about cycles. In over 200 years, there have been 8 cycles that has occurred. The difference, however, is that in the last 50 years, the rate of the cycle changes have become faster, just as the rate of shelf life of technology has become shorter. So the cycles have moved faster. In actual fact, in the last 20 years, we've had 3 cycles merged in one. The rate of the cycle change is there. Everything changed after the global financial crisis. Governments and the central bank became the chooser, the determinant of winners and losers in society, not about your productivity. So the financial industry adapted to that. Once the financial industry adapted to that, manufacturing will suffer. But here's the complex thing that you must understand about evaluating the Nigerian economy. In most economies, capital formation starts from savings. In Nigeria, it doesn't. It comes from government revenue. So your banks are bigger than your insurance companies, they are bigger than your pension companies, they are bigger than whatever, which then means that every time there is a challenge concerning the consumer, it will hit them more. Also, the consumer does not have access to consumer credit, which means that they cannot therefore breach and keep it going. Now, take it all together, the fundamental issue is that in any economic society, when you have a problem, the priority is to what? To ensure that the consumer has more money to purchase those things you need so that you can keep your manufacturing and your businesses working. You can help reduce their stock and inventory overload, which then affects the finances as well. No, that means you are talking about a transmission mechanism, which does not exist with the way we configured our governance. So if we understand that the cycles are what it is, you would understand that in the 5 to 10 years, we've reported that we have lost close to, I believe the figure is about 94 trillion in companies exiting. But that is the problem and the challenge of single factor narratives. You have only looked at it from one side. Has anybody taken time to calculate the number of companies that have entered into this environment, either taken over those existing companies or created new pathways, but maybe not necessarily as big as those other ones were, who are existing therefore, and are therefore changing the consumer purchasing landscape entirely for you. So sometimes, in order to make yourself feel good, there is something called the commonality of sorrow. What that means in effect is, I think there is an English word for it where you call it melancholy, where you just sit in the table and everybody, you complain and it makes you feel good. But the winners are those who recognizes that those complaints are within context. The changing thing is that the Nigerian society itself has changed. Tastes have changed, affiliations have changed, and we have a culture that is almost like the test is going to show you that something significant has also changed. Your pocket. So the fundamental problem is that the pocket is not a function of this economic crisis, it is a function of the changing dynamics in cycles. If you do not understand that, you will not understand the need for you to change all your internal models in your company and how you engage. In fact, what kind of processes do you use for interactions with data? The changes we see shows that, one, organizations must develop new models for engaging with the drivers of these variables that deliver macroeconomic outcomes. Because many traditional assumptions about the economy and how, when, where, and what information is used for decision-making no longer holds valid. Second, the new types of customer needs and how data is generated, collected, curated, processed, and presented require new methods and terms of engagement. Let me therefore offer some concluding thoughts. One, everyone is caught in the middle. This thing is the first and most significant thing that permeates across all strata. It's just that the degree to which it affects everyone is different. But the problem of a billionaire is truly relative, also the same as your own problem. Businesses are therefore not able to transfer the pains of their industry to household easily as they used to do before. Everyone is feeling the squeeze, and yet there are alternatives and options that may not even currently exist, and businesses that may not have been founded, that may be founded through this process, that would shape and alter this thing even further. Second, propaganda eventually gives way to planning. In this business of marketing, telling lies may not be a negative thing before. In actual fact, there are 44 categories of lies which you can actually learn, which are permissible. The easy one, of course, is what you call white lie. The other one is what you call spin. But let me explain to you, propaganda has its limits. We are at that limit right now. You can attempt to fake it to make it, but when you make it, you cannot keep it. You will not be able to sustain it anymore. And companies do that more than the TikTokers. The third one is that the household returns back as the common denominator in the economy. The fundamental principle of an economy is that the common denominator in the economy is the household. Any policy, anything you've heard, its impact on the household is always their own thing. We have left that. We'll go back to that. The fourth one is that the stage of denial is over. Data from NBS, data from government institutions, data from private sector have all combined to agree that this is a very bad time. Number 5, you are on your own. The measure is the government's subtle disposition to the squeeze, which leaves both businesses and households alike to fend for themselves. The government accepts the squeeze. The president's statement says it as well, but it did not offer that they do have anything they can do at this point. So technically, you're old. The last point, the satirization of the economy is a viable option, both for financial services, for manufacturing and everything. You must therefore right-size your products to it. So where do we go from here? A lot is dependent on how you take the conversations you have in this room. You will listen to the presentation from NielsenIQ, but I hope that some of you will also talk about your realities, but accept the major important thing that things have to change. I hope to listen in and also share with you. Thank you very much.